We just got back from Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier. We're going to try to not give any spoilers, but we would like to talk about what we thought about the movie.
I liked it. I was kind of surprised. The plot was interesting. It wasn't quite as straightforward as your normal, comic book plot, I thought. There was a little bit more depth to it. It had an actual story.
For a while, there's a lot of action movies that seem to have no kind of depth, not making any statement about society, or it's just fodder. It's just popcorn movie. And even though, there's a big aspect of that, to all these movies, this one had a little bit more to it, and the way it handled it was pretty effective. Captain America is trying to find his way in the current world. He's still working for S.H.I.E.L.D., but really hasn't fit in anywhere. So the movie takes that idea, relates it to soldiers and veterans coming back and not being able to fit in, PTSD, and just
Yeah, that was a nice touch too. I thought to add to the current event, kind of not make it seem too different from the world that we actually live in.
Well, yeah, it brought some realism to it. I mean, if you've ever looked at the comic books, Captain America is a hard one to adapt. There's a certain rhetoric element to it that disappeared decades ago, and for them to be able to pull that character off and, in my opinion, make it one of the more realistic characters in the Marvel universe. And I don't mean necessarily by realistic by what he does or can or can't do. I mean that as in it's believable that he's in this world and the way he reacts to things. He seems like he's a real person, and the actor brings a lot of that. But it's also the direction too. It's definitely grounded in some reality, and some people might say that they're co-opting topics like spying or veterans issues for a movie. I didn't feel like it was exploiting those at all. I felt like it was trying to tap into something that's real and exists and making it real for people that necessarily wouldn't be exposed to it going to see a big CG movie.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I did want to mention, just kind of randomly, there are no credits at the beginning. There are no production company logos. There's no nothing. It just goes straight into the movie. It was great. And I kept waiting for it for the first 5 minutes. I was like, okay, and then they're going to cut to the big title screen and everything. No, it never happened. And then next thing you know, you're just enjoying watching a movie.
In a lot of action-oriented movies, the movie starts with this giant complicated scene and things are blowing up. This one started with one guy on his morning run and how he's relating to other people, and it really
nice.
showed that they made an effort in this film, and they do it throughout, to deal with the character as a person rather than just going right to the explosions and just kind of having filler until you get to the explosions.
And it got you into the movie, and it made you care about the people who are going to be in the movie. It's not just lots of things are happening and you should care about this guy because things are happening to him.
It followed up with, the expected opening action scene after that, where they take down a hostage situation on a ship. And that was done, pretty practically. There was a lot of cool stuff in that as far as making it more realistic. People weren't being cartoony. Not everybody was being cartoony constantly. There were little moments where it was over the top. Scarlett Johansson, dropping down on a wire, making these perfect gun shots to 8 different people. There's a little too much of this, people have to be perfect in some way, and you saw that with Falcon in the third act, but not everybody has to be perfect. And I felt the movie worked best, when Black Widow gets shot, when Captain America gets hurt, when Nick Fury gets hurt. Those moments keep it grounded in reality as compared to a lot of other movies where your main character never gets hurt and everybody's perfect. And I felt a little bit of dichotomy there where you could tell the director wanted to ground this in some reality, but there were other times where it's just okay, let's just hand this scene over to the CG people, and then they go back to the standard kind of CG fare. And that third act is kind of where I felt that. It still works, though, because there's a story there and there's a character, who's trying to reach another character, and there's also a little bit of mystery as to how things are going to resolve.
I liked all the actors. I liked the characters, which is difficult for me to say in a lot of the newer movies. Like, I felt like I actually connected with the characters, pretty much every character that was in there. I liked the new character that they brought in, Falcon. The actor I thought was really good. I thought the part was fun. He seemed to have some fun with it. He worked really well off of Captain America. I even liked the effects that they did for his suit and everything. I thought looked pretty good. I thought most of the effects looked pretty good. There were only a few moments where I really was taken out of it by thinking, oh, that somebody just made that on their computer and it's not really there.
The Falcon character is brought in early on as somebody that adds a little bit of gravity and levity at the same time, which is hard to do both for the actor and a director. But in the last third of the movie, where he's a CG guy flying around, it lost it for me. I felt that his character should have stayed grounded in reality and reflected that side of reality for Captain America. Instead, he turns into a low-budget Iron Man and an assistant buddy. And whenever we cut to him, even though I like the character a lot, I thought the actor did a great job. He's interesting. When I cut to him during the action sequences, I really don't care about what he's doing. I want to get back to Captain America and Scarlett Johansson.
The parts where he's just being kind of a regular guy were definitely the more interesting parts. That said, I still thought, for the most part, the action scenes were pretty good. There were actually some far off shots where you can actually see two people having a fight of some kind, which was really refreshing.
As far as the action goes, my favorite scenes are the ones that are practical sets. My favorite was Samuel L. Jackson being stopped in the SUV. It's mostly practicals. If you compare it to Thor or Iron Man, it took what are purely CG scenes that are just, out of craziness of what people can do, and it really grounded the movie. I wish the movie had stayed with that and said, that one SUV getting chased down by two people, that's a lot more threatening, relatable, realistic, and could be done practically than what happens in the third act where we have three giant hovering ships that, have a timer on them and that sort of thing. Just having that practical effect where you see things getting knocked into each other, you can't duplicate that on a computer. The eye knows it looks cartoony, and for a lot of that stuff, they didn't. There was a lot of jeopardy there. You didn't know what was going to happen to Nick Fury. You didn't know exactly who was doing this to him. If the movie had stayed in that grounded, reality-based practical effects kind of action sequences, it probably would have done a little bit better in the third act.
The shootout in the SUV was definitely my favorite action scene. I found that to be the most exciting and engaging action scene. I liked Stan Lee's cameo. I thought they fitted in nicely in a way that worked. Sometimes it's a little shoehorned in.
This one, the scene couldn't really be cut. It's funny. It got a laugh in the theater. It's probably his only cameo in all the Marvel movies that I've seen that I actually liked.
I really liked the Winter Soldier character, too. I thought he was very interesting, but I liked the actor they had play him. I liked the costume. He just had a nice presence with it, too. I thought worked really well.
When he is presented, I thought, okay, this is going to be the normal, doesn't talk badass. And it started out that way, but there are a few scenes in there where they let the actor act, they give it some depth, and it's not what a lot of movies do these days where they hit check boxes. That's what I call, checkbox filmmaking. Movies these days, a lot of times, give a very brief scene about something that happens to the character, and we're supposed to log that mentally and be like, okay, this character had his girlfriend killed. But you don't have time as an audience member to see the funeral, talk to the family, have the character deal with what does he do with the girlfriend's clothes. You don't have time in most modern movies that are action oriented to let the audience experience those things. It's just a checkbox on a list. In this movie, for the most part, the items that they do bring up, they go into a little depth on. You spend enough time to start feeling what the characters are experiencing, and it helps a lot. It makes you connect with the characters. It makes you care about them and the story.
Having the time for the characters to deal with that stuff actually helps with the pacing too. Like it's about the story. It's about the characters. It's not just about getting from one action scene to another. And the movie was like 2 hours long. You said.
I have no idea how long it was. It didn't feel long. It didn't feel short.
Yeah, that's very true. the best parts of it were learning about the characters. I found it interesting. I found the way they related to each other interesting. I found the way they handled situations interesting. I just really enjoyed that about this movie, and I feel like in most of the movies you don't get the time for that. The Star Trek movies, where I find it stressful because they're just like running and yelling and running and yelling, and things are blowing up and there's explosions and action, and it's just like constant. And those would be such good movies to slow down for a few minutes and have actual like calm character interactions. This did a really good job of slowing down and having some meaningful character interactions that were enjoyable, and you weren't just like rolling your eyes and being like, oh my god, can't we just get to the next explosion? It really helped you connect with the movie and connect with the characters, I thought.
If I come out of, the latest CG extravaganza, and one of the first things I'm remembering is a car scene between Scarlett Johansson and the Captain Rogers character. Normally, those scenes are completely forgotten, and then when you go back and you watch the movie, you're like, oh, I forgot they were riding in a car, eating at a diner, talking, or whatever it is. But when you're remembering those scenes afterwards, you know they're well done. You know they're connecting to an audience.
And those are the scenes in this movie that I liked the most, was ones with 2 or 3 characters and they're just having a conversation.
You can definitely tell when a movie swings too far in one direction. People are either bored by the character-based movies or they're bored by, too many action sequences. It's a different type of boredom. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this one had a really nice balance. Some of the action went on a little bit long and was a little bit over the top and unnecessary, but the vast majority of it was used to move the plot.
We're gonna neutralize a lot of threats before they even happen.
Thought the punishment usually came after the crime.
SHIELD takes the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be.
This isn't freedom. This is fear.
A lot of movies recently have an anti-government aspect. It used to be, in the 90s, it was an evil corporation generally trying to pollute or something. But recently, it's more about governments colluding with corporations. And this one was purely about basically the Homeland Security Department and NSA spying and corrupt politicians. What did you think about that aspect of it?
To be honest, while we were watching it, I didn't really think about it in depthly. I kind of like what they did with it because they handled it on a more individual level than like this one entity is entirely corrupt.
The director did a good job of making it about decisions from individuals, whether it's the guy at a computer and whether he'll launch the final sequence. I think it speaks more to the current state of the country that people don't trust their government. They don't respect their politicians. There's a lot of unhappiness with things that are going on, and really there's not being done much to stop it, regardless of whether you think this program or that program's good or bad. There's an acceptance that everybody is now under constant surveillance from multiple people. What you say and do is being recorded somewhere. And people are worried about information being put in these giant databases that aren't necessarily secure, even if you trust the people that have them.
Yeah, they did do a nice job of touching on some of those issues in such a way that it wasn't shoved in your face either. It was done very smartly.
I think part of the reason that is because they didn't have a political agenda. A lot of movies that have political or religious agendas are so heavy-handed that they lose the effect on anybody who isn't already completely bought into that. What they did was present a reality, the good points of that and the bad points. They don't make the whole plot hinge on what political side you fall on a certain issue. It's a reality that the characters had to deal with. It's a reality that people are dealing with today, and that makes it resonate. That makes it about more than just a popcorn movie.
Yeah, it was a very relatable story overall.
One thing that I would mention is this movie progresses. It gets a little bit hokier here and there, but I thought the third act was out of line. I felt like somebody else that didn't read the first 2/3 of the script came in and wrote the last act, because it goes from practical effects to a giant CG extravaganza. It's not enough to have one thing that has to be stopped, but there's got to be 3 of them. And now there's something for all these secondary characters to do. And in reality, that film comes down to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. The resolution between those two is what holds it together. You could have two people in a bathroom fighting, and it would have the same, probably more effect than all the CG extravaganza that surrounded that. When a movie tries to surround, a tiny conflict between two people, almost like a personal relationship, and surround it with all this CG stuff, it really deadens the character, takes away from the character aspect. For instance, GoldenEye, Pierce Brosnan's James Bond is fighting Alec Trevelyan at the end, and it's a short fight. It only lasts a couple of minutes. It has a large impact because it's two people that are reconciling a problem. It's not that there are giant ships and missiles and fighters and explosions and 4 ticking time bombs, and then these other group of people are having their own crisis, and there's so much going on. It takes away from that character moment.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. There was way too much going on in the third act. There were too many different endings going on. It's very disjointed to me. It takes me out of what's happening between the two characters who the movie's supposed to be about. Cutting back and forth to that completely takes me out of the main story. And out of the movie in general, because I'm like, wait, what happens? Why am I watching this now?
Well, yeah, you have a moment with Captain America where you're not sure if he's going to live at the end, what's the character resolution is going to be. And then they cut to, the Falcon character running in a building with a CG gunship crashing into it and that sort of thing. And it's like, we're having this character moment, but don't forget, we're going to cut to this giant effects extravaganza so you don't get bored, and then we'll come back to the character moment. Now, audiences, if they bind to the characters for an hour and a half, they're going to stay with the characters for the last half hour. You don't have to surround it with all this glitch. It really detracts from it. A lot of filmmaking strives on limitations, and that's why I feel like the films reached their pinnacle in the 80s. I know a lot of people say, it's when you grew up, depending on what movies you see, but I'm going to list some reasons why I think that is. In the 80s, you had movies that used mostly practical effects because computers weren't much of an option at that point. I think today's special effects look hokey. They look cartoony when somebody's flying around or falling and bouncing off the thing. I don't know why audiences accept them.
Yeah.
But the limitations on movies in the 80s were you could not have a budget that would justify 2 hours of action. They were forced to create characters, have character moments, and continue to go back with them. Today it can be 2 hours of CG instead of practical effects. And those advances, in my opinion, have actually harmed filmmaking.
When we go back and watch movies, like The Running Man, one of my personal favorite movies, most of the action in that is like a couple of people fighting another person. It's all done practically. It's exciting. It's interesting. It has its cheesy moments and everything, but I find that a lot more relatable and a lot easier to accept as reality. I do find it distracting when I'm thinking, wow, that really should have ripped both of those guys' arms off just then.
Yeah.
Or I'm pretty sure all their internal organs have exploded.
Or why can Captain America fall, 40 stories onto concrete? There's a lot of things like that where I'm not sure how strong Captain America is supposed to be or how much he can withstand. But I guess they're trying to create those moments where audiences are in awe of the main character. And it's not really necessary. We don't have to be in awe of the main character to like him.
Yeah.
That's another limitation of filmmaking where it benefits to have limitations on your character. How far can he fall and what type of injuries will he get? You have those limits and you stick to them. 6 people shooting at him with machine gun fire, didn't hurt him this time. Why is he worried about that this time? Or why did he get hit this time? It makes you kind of have to buy into the movie a little bit more and just give it leeway, and it's really not necessary. When you ground a movie in reality, one guy shooting a pistol at Captain America is a threat, and there's instances in that movie where this happens and it is a threat. There's no reason to have 5 or 6 people shooting automatic gunfire at him and then pretend that's less threatening than that one guy with one pistol.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like movies are moving away from the wall-to-wall action, and they're getting back to having those little character moments that help an audience connect, and they're using higher caliber actors so that they can do that, even if it's with the 30-second scene. And that's helping. I wish they would continue to move in that direction. I hope they do. And I really hope that they start cutting out this third act CG extravaganza that seems to be required of every movie. Who would you recommend this movie for?
I'd say if you liked the first Captain America movie, if you're a fan of the comic book movie genre, if you're a fan of fun movies, anyway, it was a fun action movie. I would say if you're already a fan of that genre, definitely. If you're not, it might be even a nice introduction film to the comic book movie genre, or at least give it a chance, even if it's not usually something that you would go for.
Well, I would recommend the movie to just about anybody of any age. I mean, there's enough action there for younger people to like it. There's, there's some good moral values in there to some degree. There's definitely something in there for adults too. It touches on some deeper subjects, and it's a fun movie. You know, if you want to get fully emotionally invested in characters and see people dying of cancer and stuff, this isn't that. But for most people, this is going to be a good film to see.
There were people of all ages and demographics.
Yeah, we saw 3 women that must have been in their 60s or 70s come out.
There were kids, like
4-year-olds dressed, 6-year-olds.
With their Captain America shields, who seemed to be enjoying themselves. And they were quiet the whole time, which I think is also a good sign that the movie was entertaining.
So that was our review of Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier. I hope you go out and see it. And if you do, definitely leave in the comments and let us know what you think.